This is Sam Brown. He and his family own the documents that you see before you. There is an exhibit at the Westin Hotel on West Street, the Hall of Presidents before Washington. So this is the basis for that exhibit. These documents have been replicated, laser replicas, and then framed with information panels, talking about what's going on in the documents and also some information about the people themselves. And they start in chronological order. That was when the exhibit opened up. The mayor was there, county executive was there, governors, state representatives. I mean, this was historical. There's no place in the world, let alone this country, that has these particular individuals in one place. So it's one-stop shopping. You start on the left side, like at the end, go ahead and come on in, with Peyton Randolph, the first president of the first Continental Congress. And then it goes around the hall in chronological order until you get to Washington over here, who's the 15th individual after these 14, so that you get that chronological context. And Washington's the first president of the second Constitution. Now, was the Articles of Confederation actually a constitution? We're going to talk about this next week, because the first version of the United States is more of a regional alliance of sovereign states. The version we're in now, the Second Republic, is a single state. So that's the difference between the two eras, so to speak. But during this period, these are the people who led Congress. Now, there's different categories. So you have Peyton Randolph is the first president of the first Continental Congress, but nobody's declared independence yet, right? This is just a meeting of all the colonies. He doesn't finish, though. He, as president, he's got to go back and vote in the House of Burgesses. So he leaves a little early, and Henry Middleton takes over. And it only turns out to be for 4 days. When the Second Continental Congress resumes the following year, Peyton Randolph is right back to being president again. Come on in, guys. But then he dies, and John Hancock takes over. Probably heard of John Hancock, right? It's under John Hancock that the United States actually declares independence. And he signs the Declaration of Independence as any president would sign a bill. Does that make sense? And that's people say, well, his signature is so big so the king would see it. Well, his signature was big, the king would see it, but as you can tell from this original document, there's his signature, right? That's just how he signed. He had a naturally big signature. Doesn't that look exactly like the Declaration of Independence there? In this particular document, this is a bill, Congress, they are giving rank to troops that have been assigned to the Continental Army. So how it worked back then was that rank was given in the earlier stage by the state, but then the upper rank was given by Congress, and Hancock is talking about that here. Hancock is the longest serving of the pre-Washington presidents, about 2.5 years, because the office of president that's in the Articles of Confederation in Article 9 is supposed to be for a 1-year period, but the articles haven't been ratified yet. They've been passed by Congress in 1777, but unlike later on the Constitution, which was ratified, in the same year or within a year, this one took almost 4 years to ratify. They went by it informally, but it wasn't binding until it was ratified in 1781. So from 1781 forward, you have 1-year terms. Up until then, it varied. It could be significantly less than a year. In Hancock's case, it was 2.5 years. Finally, he leaves the office, and Henry Lawrence takes over. This is the 4th person to hold this office, but the second one since the Declaration of Independence. Now that they declared independence, all these people are traitors, right? They're the political leaders of the rebellion, even if you have Washington and others in the army who are the military leaders. So here you have Washington, as you know, as commander-in-chief. It's a separate office than president. Under the new Constitution, that's a fused position, right? But it was separate back then. Come on in. So Washington, he's commander-in-chief, but these are the presidents of Congress. But they're not independent yet as recognized by the British. They've declared it, but the British haven't agreed to it. So you're in rebellion, and you have a revolution going on. Henry Lawrence, after he becomes president, ends up being an emissary to the Netherlands to get them in the war effort, which he's successful in doing. Then he gets captured by the British at sea, and he is taken to the Tower of London as a POW, the only American POW during the Revolutionary War to be held at the Tower of London. Tower of London is a wonderful place to go if you've ever been a tourist. Anybody ever been to the Tower of London? Definitely, it's on the must-see list if you go there, but you wouldn't want to be there as a POW. He ends up being exchanged for Lord Cornwallis after Lord Cornwallis surrenders at Yorktown, and they're exchanged, and he's set free. 5th person is John Jay. You probably heard of him, right? Out of these 14, the only ones you've probably heard of are the John Jay, John Hancock, and if you're from Maryland, John Hanson. John Jay, of course, is better known as a negotiator of the Treaty of Paris, as the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, as one of the authors of the Federalist Papers, but he did serve as President of Congress. And then he negotiated the Treaty of Paris after that. Samuel Huntington serves after John Jay. Now, it's under Samuel Huntington of Connecticut that the Articles are actually ratified by Congress, March 1st, 1781. So Huntington's descendants say he's the actual first president of the United States because the Articles have been ratified. That's true, but would the British agree with that? No. Everyone's still in rebellion. Huntington, his health isn't good. He leaves office before the year is up. Thomas McCain takes over. Thomas McCain is the ancestor of David McCain. David McCain was at the opening of the exhibit. He's Barack Obama's ambassador to Luxembourg. And he's written a book about his famous ancestor, saying that since McCain is the first new president after the ratification of the Articles, he's the first real president of the United States. Do you agree with that? See, Huntington was the sitting president when the Articles were ratified. McCain's the first new president once they were ratified. So his descendants make that claim. But again, the British would not agree. After McCain, you get John Hanson of Maryland. John Hanson is the first new president after the Articles are ratified to actually serve a completed one-year term. So his descendants here in Maryland say he's the first president of the United States. Do you agree with that? But it's an argument you could make, right? After Hanson, you have Elias Boudinot. It's under Elias Boudinot that the Treaty of Paris is actually signed. But it has to be ratified on both sides and exchanged in order to make it official. That hasn't happened yet. Congress is in Princeton. They move to Annapolis, right here. They arrive November 26, 1783. Thomas Mifflin is going to be the President of Congress. Mifflin, up to this point, he was a military officer. He was in the Revolution as an aide to George Washington. He's the President of Congress here. And Mifflin does some very interesting things for someone who's considered to be a president that can only do what Congress authorizes. Sign the bills of things Congress decided. They can't really act on their own. Not unlike a prime minister in the British system. So Mifflin's the one that actually accepts George Washington's resignation. That's what we're going to see on our October 2nd tour when we go to the State House, and Washington's letter of resignation is in a glass case and it's addressed to Mr. President. And people think that's odd. I thought Washington was president. Washington wouldn't be president for 6 more years. So who's this Mr. President in his letter? Not only is he calling Thomas Mifflin president, he's calling him Mr. President. Mifflin is the president of Congress, and it says that at the State House. Mifflin would go on to sign the ratified Treaty of Paris. His signature is the only one on that document other than the Secretary of Congress, Charles Thompson. That's the document that's exchanged with the British on May 7, 1784, making independence official. The British have agreed not to fight and that the United States is independent. Thomas Mifflin is the first president of the United States that the British actually recognize as the leader of this country. And yet nobody's ever heard that story. The exhibit across the street, though, goes a long way towards telling you who Mifflin was and his significance here in Annapolis while Congress was here. But this exhibit tells you about all the other people that served in that position too. Congress leaves Annapolis in August of 1784 and goes to Trenton, and Richard Henry Lee is the president of Congress from Virginia. It's under Richard Henry Lee that the Mount Vernon Compact is negotiated. Remember we talked about that this morning? Maryland and Virginia agreeing to share the Potomac, and then Maryland eventually allowing all the states to share the use of the Potomac. That is a very big event because it showed the states could negotiate something. And so James Madison says, maybe we should get together and talk about the inefficiencies of the Articles of Confederation. All of us, more than just Maryland and Virginia. That's what happens here in Annapolis in 1786 at Mann's Tavern, which no longer exists, right behind Chicken Roost Deli, which wasn't there at the time. James Madison probably wishes it was because he could have had a 6-pound milkshake while going through this conference. So September 11, the anniversary was just a few days ago, to 1786, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and 10 other members of not Congress, 10 other delegates from representing the states evaluate the Articles of Confederation to see if it can deal with the problems of the day, which are mostly the Revolutionary War debts left over that were agreed to by signing the Treaty of Paris. And they determined that it cannot be resolved. And there needs to be a new meeting in Philadelphia the following spring, which, as you know, is the Constitutional Convention. That's all decided right here in Annapolis, in a building that was eventually converted to a theater and burned to the ground in 1909 and doesn't exist anymore, and it's a gravel parking lot surrounded by a wooden fence with no designation that occurred there, which is really a shame. The pre-Constitutional Convention in many ways. And so Congress is in New York during this time, even though this convention is going on here. In Philadelphia, they have the Constitutional Convention. Congress is still in New York. Nathaniel Gorham is the president now. Nathaniel Gorham is the president while Shays' Rebellion begins. And eventually Shays' Rebellion is put down in February of 1787 while Arthur Sinclair is president, former, Revolutionary War soldier. After Shays' Rebellion is put down, the Constitutional Convention takes place, and eventually Cyrus Griffin, the last pre-Washington president, the last thing he does is sign the bill that approves this new Constitution to be put on the ballot to be ratified, for the states to accept. And then he resigns, clearing the path for George Washington to be inaugurated in April as the first new president of the new Constitution. All right, so that's who these people are, from Peyton Randolph all the way to Cyrus Griffin, 1774 to 1788. Continental Congress period, Revolutionary War period, and then that after the Revolutionary War, first era of independence, where Thomas Mifflin is recognized as the first president. The U.S. is independent, but there's all that debt to pay. And it takes 4 years to figure out how to pay that debt, and finally it's the new Constitution that allows them to do it. So there's that era from 1783 to 1788, and then we're in the new constitutional period that we're in now. So what I want you to do is go through in order and turn the portraits over and look at the original documents. 14 separate documents signed by these 14 individuals, 11 of them as president. And what you will see under their names, either printed or handwritten, is the word president. So you've got primary documents that prove that these men served as president, were called president, acted as president, and it was part of their title. And that's the significance of this collection. The only place, the Westin in the world, where these particular individuals are in one place. And that's where we're going to go, as I said, on October 2. So let's thank Sam Brown for bringing in the originals today. Thank you, Sam. Thank you. Thank you. And go ahead. Go around the table one by one. Turn the documents over. Take a look at the original documents. And thanks for coming today. Thank you.